Okay, so in this week's class, we're moving back to paper 1. We've been studying stuff from paper 2 since Christmas, and the only thing that we haven't covered yet is geometry. But for the next couple of weeks, we're going to go back to paper 1 and have a look at the things that we skipped on paper 1. What we're going to start this week's class on is percentage increase and decrease and VAT. And we're going to move on and then start talking about salaries. You'll notice that there's a PDF on the page, and what I want you to do is if you have a printer, ideally I want you to print out the PDF, and if not, then at least you can download it and take the questions down into your notes. And as I go through these questions, what I want you to do is I want you to try each question and then watch my solution on it. So I think there's no point in you just sitting there and watching me going through the questions. I want you to try them yourself first and then watch my solutions on it and see if you get the same answer. Okay, so let's have a look at the first question here. In the first question, it says the price of a laptop was €837.50 before VAT at 13.5% was added. Find the price of the laptop after VAT was added and leave your answer to 2 decimal places. Now, we haven't come across VAT yet. VAT stands for value-added tax, and I'm sure any of you who do junior cert business will be aware of it. Basically, it's just tax on goods. If you go into a shop, no matter what you buy, if you buy a sliced pan of bread, there's a certain price on the bread that the shop is charging, but then there's tax on top of that. Usually it's in around 13%. Basically everything that you buy, there's 13.5% added on, and that money is tax that goes to the government. So in this case, someone's buying a laptop, and the actual company are charging €837.50. That's how much the company are going to get. But they have to charge tax on top of that. So if you walked into this shop to buy this laptop, it's going to cost you more than that. Now, I'm going to do question 1 here a long-winded way because I want you to do all of these questions the exact same way. This is an easy question, and the next one, question 2, is going to be slightly harder. But the way that I want you to always do them exactly the way I'm going to do this one. The price before VAT, you should always view that as 100% of the price of the laptop. So the price before VAT is added is 100% of the price of the laptop, or 100% of the price of whatever. In this case, the price before VAT was added was €837.50. You need to consider this to be 100% of the price of the laptop. 100% of the price of the laptop is €837.50. But now I know that the company are going to add on 13.5%. So ultimately, I need to work out what is 113.5% of this value. Obviously, the company are going to charge a little bit more because of tax. What you should do next, which we're always going to do in these questions, is if we know 100%, what we now want to do is we want to find 1%. So think about what do you need to do to 100 in order to turn it into a 1. If you've 100 and you need to turn it into a 1, you need to divide that by 100. If you divide the right hand side by 100 here, you'll be left with 1%. But if you divide the right hand side by 100, you must also divide the left hand side by 100. If you divide 837.50 by 100, you're going to get 8.375. So 1% of the price of this laptop is 8.375 euros. Now that you know 1% of the price of the laptop, you can answer the question. It said find the price of the laptop after VAT was added. Well, once VAT has been added, you're going to have the original price of the laptop plus the 13.5% tax that's added on. Or in other words, you're going to have 113.5%. I need to work out what is 113.5% of the price of this laptop. So you have to ask yourself, what do you need to do to the right hand side to go from 1% to 113.5%? Clearly what you need to do is you just take 1, if you get 1 and you multiply it by 113.5, that will give you 113.5%. If you multiply the right hand side by 113.5, you must also multiply the left hand side by 113.5. If we take this figure and multiply by 113.5, your final answer in this case works out as €950.56. So the actual laptop the amount of money that the company would get is $837.50. However, because we're living in Ireland, everything you buy, you have to pay tax on it. And you have to pay tax in order to be part of this society. So we have to add an extra 13.5% tax. So they told me 100% of the price of the laptop. My answer, what I was looking for, was 113.5% of the price of the laptop. The amount of money you would actually have to pay if you walked into the shop to buy this laptop is this figure. Now, I want to use this template to answer all of the questions that come up on VAT, all of the questions that come up on percentages. Admittedly, I probably dragged that one out and made we could have done that one a little bit easier, but if we follow that template, all the rest of the questions are going to be identical. Okay, so again, please attempt this question before you actually watch my solutions on it. The second question is identical to the first question, except we're now given the price after VAT. We're told the price of a laptop was $837.50 after VAT was added. So this is the price of the laptop plus the 13.5% of VAT. And we're asked to find the price of the laptop before the VAT was added and leave your answer to 2 decimal places. So I told you I want you to always consider the price of the item before VAT is added is 100%. Which means the price after VAT was added is 100% plus whatever the VAT was. The VAT was 13.5%. So I know that if I walked into this shop, it would cost me €837.50 to buy this laptop. That is the price of the laptop plus the VAT that has been added on. So that is equivalent to 113.5% of the original price of the laptop. I want to work out what is 100%. How much would this laptop have cost if there was no VAT at all, if no tax was involved? Just exactly the same as the last question, the next thing you should try and work out is what is 1%. It always gets students to go down to 1%. So I need to figure out, if I know what 113.5% is, how will I find 1%? What do I need to do to 113.5 in order to turn it into a 1? I just need to divide that number by itself. So what I need to do is divide the right hand side by 113.5. If you're going to divide the right hand side by 113.5, you also must divide the left hand side by 113.5. Now if you do that in this case, 1% works out as 7.37885. 1% of the price of the laptop was €7.37885. Now the question asked me to find the price before VAT was added. We always consider the price before VAT was added as being 100%. I want to know what is 100%. What is the cost of this laptop before the 13.5% had been added on? If you know 1, obviously in order to turn 1 into a 100, I need to multiply by 100. So in this case, we're going to multiply both sides by 100. And if we do that, if we multiply the left-hand side by 100, you're going to get €737.885. But obviously it doesn't make sense. Money we would never leave to 3 decimal places. We always leave it to 2 decimal places because it would be cents. So in this case, we'd have to round up. Because it's 85, I'd have to round to 9. So the cost of this laptop before VAT was added must have been €737.89. Okay, question 3 is a little bit different. This one's about percentage profit. In question 3, we're told that a company buys a suit for €650 and they sell it for €950. So they get it in from their manufacturer or whoever, and it costs them €650 to buy the suit, and they decide that they're going to, obviously the whole principle behind a shop or a company is that they want to make a profit. So they boost up the price to €950, and that's what they charge the customer. I'm asked to calculate the percentage profit the company makes and leave your answer to 1 decimal place. Okay, so if I'm looking for percentage profit, then obviously the first thing I need to do is work out the actual profit. The first thing I need to do is work out how much money does the company make on this suit. To work out the profit, it's obviously the amount that they charge minus the amount that they paid for it. The company are going to charge customers €950 to buy the suit, whereas it only cost them €650 to buy the suit, which means the profit they make on each suit is €300. I can use this €300 to work out the percentage profit that the company makes. To work out percentage profit, there's a formula for it for percentage profit. The percentage profit a company makes, it's the profit divided by the cost price. It's the profit divided by how much it cost them. Profit divided by cost price. It's not the selling price. They make €300 profit and the suit cost them €650. So to work out percentage profit, it's the amount of profit divided by the cost price, and then remember that to turn things into percentages, you multiply by 100 over 1. So in this case, I know the profit and I know the cost price. The profit that the company makes on each suit is €300, and the cost that each suit was to the company was €650. So the percentage profit will be 300 divided by 650 multiplied by 100 over 1. And I was asked to leave my answer to one decimal place. So if you plug that into your calculator, your final answer for this question is 46.2%. The percentage profit that the company makes on each suit is 46.2%. Okay, so the next thing in the notes here is an exam question, 2015 paper 1 question 2. In this question, we're told that David weighs 88 kilos, while the average male triathlete of his height only weighs 83 kilos. If David aims to reach this weight, what percentage decrease is required? And give your answer to 2 decimal places. So David wants to go from 88 kilos to 83 kilos, and I need to work out the percentage decrease. If he loses that much weight, what is the percentage decrease in his weight? So obviously the first thing I need to do is work out the actual decrease. So he currently weighs 88 kilos and he wants to go down to 83 kilos. So in other words, he wants to decrease 5 kilos. That's what he's trying to lose. Now I need to get to 5, but the question is, am I getting 5 as a percentage of 83 or 5 as a percentage of 88? In order to answer that question, the wording is really, really important here. We're looking for the percentage decrease. What percentage decrease? He's decreasing from 88. So I need to get 5 as a percentage of 88 because his original weight, I want to get what percentage of his original weight is he losing? So in this case, it's going to be 5, the amount of weight he wants to lose, divided by his actual weight. I want to get 5 as a percentage of his starting weight, and to turn things into percentages, we multiply by 100 over 1. If you plug that into your calculator, the question asks you to leave it to 2 decimal places, so your answer is going to be 5.68%. The percentage decrease, if he went from his original weight down to 83, would be a 5.68% decrease. Okay, in the second part of this question, we were told that Mary's house was worth €200,000. Mary increased the value of her house by 15% by building a conservatory. She then increased it by another 10% by repaving the driveway. We've been asked to find the percentage increase in value. So often when I do this question with students, they think you can just add the 15 and the 10. It's not that simple, because this is 15% of the original price. So then it increased in value, and then it increased by 10% of that. So I need to do this separately. I need to work out what is the final value of Mary's house, and then I'll be able to work out the percentage increase from there. So I want to drag this one out. We're going to do this one the same way as we did the questions on VAT. I would start this question off by calling the 200,000, the original price of the house is 100%. 100% of the house at the start of this scenario is 200,000. However, Mary has increased it by 15%. So I want to work out what is 115% of this figure. The first thing we'll do is we'll work out what is 1%. If I know 100% is 200,000, to go from 100% to 1%, you just divide both sides by 100. If you divide the right hand side by 100, you end up saying that 1% is equal to 2,000. So I can say that 1% of the price of this house is €2,000. And I want to work out, if it's increased by 15%, I want to work out what is 115% of the price of this house. So in order to go from 1% to 115%, you just multiply by 115. If you multiply the right hand side by 115, obviously I'm just on 115%. If If you multiply the left hand side by 115, you end up with 230,000. Or in other words, after she's built her conservatory, the house is worth 230,000. That's the first thing I would do. Now the house is worth 230,000 and she increased its value by a further 10%. So I would suggest you basically just do the same thing again. Before she goes to repave the driveway, the value of the house is 230,000. The house is worth 230,000, and in this case I'm going to represent that as 100% of the value of the house. And now she's going to repave the driveway, so it's obviously going to be worth 110% of that figure. So what I would suggest now is, once again, we're just going to get 1%. If I know that 100% is 230,000, I want to divide both sides by 100. If I divide both sides by 100, I'll work out what was 1% of the price of the house before she repaved the driveway. So you divide that side by 100 means I have to divide this side by 100. If you're going to divide 230,000 by 100, you're going to get 2,300. So I can say that the 1% of the price of the house before she repaved the driveway was €2,300. After she's repaved the driveway, the house is worth 110% of what it was worth. So if I know 1%, I want to multiply both sides by 110. If you multiply the right hand side by 110, you end up with 110%. If you multiply 2,300 by 110, you're going to get 253,000. So I know that after she's repaved the driveway, the house is worth 253,000. So that's the final value of the house. The final value of the house is 253,000. And in this case, I was asked to find the percentage increase in the value. So to work out the percentage increase, we've already looked at one of these as well. The first thing I'll do is work out how much has it increased by. So the house, to work out the actual increase, it's the amount of money the house is worth minus what it was originally. After all of these renovations, Mary's house is worth 253,000. If Mary's house is worth 253,000 and it was originally worth 200,000, I can work out that obviously her house has increased in value by 53,000. So Mary's house has increased in value by 53,000. And remember, to get the percentage increase, we did it in the previous question, percentage increase is the increase over the original price of the house. So to work out the percentage increase in this case, it's the 53,000, which is how much it is increased by, divided by the original price of the house. The house has increased in value by 53,000 and originally it was worth 200,000. 53 divided by 200,000, and then to turn it into a percentage, you multiply by 100 over 1. If I get 53,000 divided by 200,000 and I multiply by 100 over 1, my answer works out as 26.5%. So overall, Mary's house has increased in value by 26.5%. Okay, the next question on the booklet is 2015 Sample Paper 1, Question 5. So I want you to work through this question first before you watch my solution on it. In this question, we're told that a meal in a restaurant cost Jerry €30.52 and the price included VAT at 9%. Jerry wanted to know the price of the meal before VAT was included. So he got 9% of €30.52 and subtracted it from the cost of the meal. And the first part of the question says, explain why Jerry's method is wrong. In order to explain why Jerry's method is wrong, your best bet is to actually do the correct method. What I would always tell students to do first is actually work out what would have been the correct thing to do. Mathematically do the correct thing, and it'll be very easy for you to tell why Jerry was wrong. So let's just think about this. When we're talking about VAT, we always consider the cost of the meal before VAT as being 100%. 100% is the cost of the meal before the VAT was added. I know that €30.52 is the cost of the meal plus the VAT. 9% VAT has already been added to this figure. So that tells me that the price that Jerry actually paid, €30.52, is in fact 109% of the original cost of the meal. It's the cost of the meal, the 100%, plus the 9% VAT. So we'll just follow the same logic as we've been doing throughout the video. If you know 109%, the next thing you should try and do is find 1%. In order to turn 109 into 1, you divide it by itself. So you divide by 109. If you're going to divide the right hand side by 109, you should also divide the left hand side by 109. €30.52 divided by 109 gives me 0.28. So 1% of the price of this meal was 0.28. And what I want to find is I want to know what 100% of the price of the meal was. I want to know how much would this meal have cost before VAT was included. So obviously I need to get 100%. If I know 1%, in order to turn it into 100%, you just simply multiply by 100. If you're multiplying the right hand side by 100, you should also multiply the left hand side by 100. And that tells me that the price of this meal before VAT was included was €28. The price of the meal before VAT was included was €28. So the problem with Jerry's tactic, Jerry got the price. So if Jerry wanted to know the price of the meal before VAT was included, Jerry got 9% of this figure and subtracted it, when in fact Jerry should have been getting 9% of the original figure. Jerry needed to get 9% of €28 and subtract it from this, or else he needed to do it like this. Basically, to get the marks in a question like this, you would just need to say that this is what Jerry should have done. 9% of €30.52 is not the same as 9% of €28. So just to ensure you're getting the marks, I would say that Jerry should have calculated 9% of the original cost of the meal. The original cost of the meal was €28. He needed 9% of this figure, not 9% of the figure once VAT had been included. And once we have this bit of maths done, it makes life a lot easier to do part B. In part B, we're asked to suppose that the rate of VAT was 13.5% instead of 9%. How much would Jerry have paid for the meal in that case? Well, we worked out in part A that the price of the meal before VAT was added was €28. And we always consider the price before VAT as being 100%. So if we divide both sides by 100, we work out what 1% of the price of the meal was. It was €0.28. And now if we're adding on 13.5% instead of 9%, that means we want to know what is 113.5% of the original cost of the meal. So you multiply both sides by 113.5. And 0.28 multiplied by 113.5 gives you €31.78. And that's your final answer for part B. Okay, so what we're talking about for the next few videos is income tax. It's probably the most important thing we're going to talk about in class this week. Now, it's really important you understand the difference between gross and net. Okay, gross income is the amount of money that someone earns before tax, whereas net income is the amount of money that someone actually physically receives. So for example, let's say someone earns a salary, a gross salary of €60,000. That means that the company they work for pays them €60,000. However, if someone was on a salary of €60,000, that doesn't mean that they'd actually physically receive €60,000, because a substantial percentage of your gross income is paid in tax to the government. So if someone was earning a gross salary of €60,000, in reality they might only receive €40,000 and 20,000 of it goes to the government. So in the next few questions, we're going to be working out the amount of income tax that someone might have to pay. Let's look at the first example here. It would probably be easier if we go through the first question, then I'll explain it in detail. In this question, Joan has a gross income of €50,000. Gross income refers to the amount of money the company will pay her. She doesn't actually get all of the money, and because she has to pay taxes on her money. Her standard rate cut-off point is 28,000 and her tax credit is 3,500. Okay, it's really important that we talk about this standard rate cut-off point. Depending on how much money you earn, you pay more tax. So if someone was on a lower rate, if someone is on a very small salary, the percentage of tax they have to pay is much lower. Whereas if someone is on a really, really high salary, the percentage of tax they have to pay is much higher. So in this case, we're told that her standard rate cut-off point is 28,000. That means that on the first €28,000 that Joan earns, she pays a lower rate of tax. But on any money that she earns above the standard rate cutoff point, she pays a higher rate of tax. This makes perfect sense if you think about it in terms of a society. If there was a person living in Ireland earning only €20,000 a year, it's not a lot of money, so they might struggle to survive. So they have to pay lower rates of tax. Whereas if there was someone earning €150,000 a year, they're going to have to pay a much higher rate of tax on everything that they earn above this point. In this question, we're told that the standard rate of tax is 20% and the higher rate is 42%. That means that up until the standard rate cutoff point, on the first €28,000 that Joan earns, she's only going to pay 20% tax. But on anything she earns above that figure, she's going to pay a higher rate of tax of 42%. We've been asked to find her net income for the year. The net income is the amount of money that she will actually take home. So her gross income is 50,000. We need to work out how much tax does she have to pay. If we figure out that she has to pay 10,000 in tax, we get 10,000 and take it away from her gross income, and that will tell us her net income, the amount of money that she's actually going to get to take home. So I want to go through this question. The maths in these questions is really straightforward. It's literally just multiplying and adding. I want you to always structure your questions the way that I'm going to structure this one. Right, I know that Joan's gross salary is €50,000. And I know that she's going to pay two different rates of tax. And so on up until the standard rate cutoff point, in the first €28,000 that she earns, she's going to pay the lower rate of tax. So the first €28,000 that she earns, she's going to pay 20% tax on that. Now I need to figure out how much more than 28,000 is she going to earn. So €50,000 minus €28,000 tells me that she earns €22,000 above the standard rate cutoff point. Basically, this figure and this figure always have to add up to your 50,000. 22 and 28 gives me 50, so I'm happy enough with that. She's earning €22,000 above the standard rate cutoff point. So on the €22,000 she earns above the standard rate cutoff point, she pays the higher rate of tax. So she's going to have to pay 42% tax on the remaining 22 grand. On the first €28,000 that she earns, she pays a lower rate of tax, and on the remaining 22,000 she pays a higher rate of tax. Now if we plug these into our calculator, 28,000 multiplied by 20% will give me €5,600. She's going to have to pay €5,600 tax on this amount of money. If I then get 42% of 22,000, it's going to work out as 9,240. So she's going to pay €9,240 tax on this 22,000. What I need to do now is I need to add up. I'm going to add up the 5,600 and the 9,240. If I add these two different rates of tax, I'm going to end up with €14,840. So the amount of tax that she would have to pay there is €14,840. Now this is called the gross tax. This is the gross tax, and as we go through these questions, I want you in each case to write out what each one is. Remember that gross is the amount before deductions. Her gross income here was 50,000, but that's not the amount of money that she actually receives. Her gross tax is the amount of tax before deductions, but that's not the amount of money the amount of tax that she actually pays, because she was given a tax credit of €3,500. Everyone in a society is entitled to a tax credit. Tax credits are calculated often as whether you're married or whether you're a single parent, whether you're divorced, depending on your status, you get a certain tax credit. And basically, it's an amount of money from the government. You don't have to pay €3,500 of your tax. In this case, Joan has a tax credit of €3,500, so that we subtract that from her gross tax. That's €3,500 that she doesn't have to pay. So it reduces the amount of tax that you actually pay. 14,840 minus 3,500 leaves me with €11,340. And this we refer to as the net tax. This is her net income tax. This is the amount of tax that she actually has to pay. So she earned €50,000 from her company pays her €50,000, but she has to pay net tax of €11,340. These two figures are going to allow me to work out her net income, the amount of money that Joan actually gets to spend. So her company pays her a gross income of €50,000, but the net tax that she has to pay on that €50,000 is €11,340. If I get the amount of money her company has to pay her minus the amount of tax she has to pay, that will give me the net income, the amount of money that she will actually receive. €50,000 minus 11,340 will leave me with €38,660. So the amount of money that she will actually get to take home, her actual net income, is €38,660. Now, so I want you to maybe watch this one twice just to make sure you're clear on why we're doing each step. And then I want you to try the next couple of questions yourself. Okay, so let's have a look at question 2 now. In question 2 it says Sally has an annual salary of 45,000 and her standard rate cutoff point is 25,000 and the tax credit is 3,000. If the standard rate of tax is 21% and the higher rate is 41%, find her net income for the year. So Sally has earned a gross income of 45,000. However, she has to pay tax, so she doesn't actually receive €45,000. That's only her gross income. On the first 25,000 that she earns, she has to pay 21% tax. And then 45 minus 25 tells me that she earns another 20 grand above the standard rate cutoff point. So on the remaining 20,000, she has to pay the higher rate of tax, which is 41%. Remember that this figure and this figure, 20 and 25, will always add up to the gross income, the 45,000. So she's going to pay 21% on the first 25,000, 41% on the remaining 20,000. 21% of 25,000 is 5,250. 41% of 20,000 is 8,200. If we add those two figures up, it tells me that the gross tax, the amount of tax before deductions, is 13,450. That's when we add the 5,250 and the 8,200. However, people don't have to pay all of their tax. That is only her gross tax, because the government entitles you to a tax credit. In this case, Sally is entitled to a tax credit of €3,000. So that means you subtract 3,000 from her gross tax, and that gives me her net tax. 13,000 minus 3,000 gives me 10,000, so I end up with my net tax of 10,450. Now the question was to find her net income. Her net income is the amount of money that she actually gets to take home. So her gross salary was 45,000. If you subtract the net tax, the amount of money she earned minus the amount of tax she has to pay, that gives me 34,550. That tells me that the amount of money Sally actually gets to take home, her net income, is 34,550. Okay, now this is probably the hardest question we're going to do all in the whole class, so I want you to pay close attention to part 2 here. You'll notice that I've written the answer for part 1 just above this because we're going to need to use this answer to work out part 2. We're told that the next year, Sally's net income increased to €35,730. Her rates of tax and her tax credit remain the same. So she's still paying 21% on the first 25,000, 41% on whatever else she earns. And she still has a tax credit of 3,000. We're asked to use this information to find her gross income for the year. We're asked to find her gross income. So we're trying to find this figure. We're trying to find her gross income, which is like, it's like we have to go work backwards. We worked out in part 1 that she earned 45,000. On the first 25,000 that she earned, she was going to pay 21% tax. On the remaining 20,000, she was going to pay 41% tax. We added those together and we got 13,450. We subtracted her tax credit and worked out that her net tax was €10,450. If we take her gross income, 45,000, minus her net tax, it told us that her net income was €34,550 the previous year. But now the next year, her net income is €35,730. So the first thing that we should do is work out how much has her net income increased by. It was 34,550 and it's now this figure. So to work out how much her net income has increased by, we just subtract the two figures. We just take 34,550 from the answer from what we were given in part 2. If we subtract these two figures, we work out that the increase in her pay was €1,180. She has she has received an extra €1,180 net income. And I need to use this figure to work out how much has her gross income increased by. What must this figure have become so that ultimately she ended up with an extra €1,180? Well, clearly, in the second year, the figure will be bigger than 45,000. She's earned more money, so she has earned more than 45,000. I want you to consider what will happen to these two lines if this was bigger than 45,000. Like imagine if this was a 50,000 or whatever. The standard rate cutoff point is 25,000. We're told that her rates of tax remain the same, so the standard rate cutoff point this year would still be 25,000. So if this number was bigger, nothing would have changed in this line. Nothing would have changed. This line would still be 25,000 by 21%. She's still going to be paying 21% tax on the first €25,000 that she earned. However, then what you would do, you would take 25 from this figure, and whatever is remaining you would pay at 41% tax. So her income has increased, and all of that income, all of the increase would have been paid at 41% tax because it's above the standard rate cutoff point. So any extra money that she earned this year, she would have had to pay 41% tax on it. It's really important. Whatever her gross income is increased by, she would have paid 41% tax on it. If she would have paid 41% tax, let's just think about that. 100 minus 41% leaves me with 59. If she was paying 41% tax on the extra money that she earned, that means she only received 59% of the extra money that she earned. 41% of the increase in her salary went to the government in the form of tax, but 59% of it would have went into her pocket. She would have received 59% of the increase in her salary, in her gross income. But we've already worked out that the amount of extra money she's earned is 1,180. I can deduce that this is 59% of the increase in her salary. 41% of it went to the government and she got 59% of it, and I know that this is the amount of extra money she's got. So I'm going to do this one the same way as we did percentages at the start of class. The increase in her salary in her net income was €1,180, and that is equivalent to 59% of the total increase in her gross income. The amount that this figure actually increased by. If you know 59%, what you should do is work out what 1% is and then convert that to 100%. So what we would do here is divide both sides by 59. Because if you divide 59 by 59, you'll end up with 1% of the increase in her gross income. If you divide 1180 by 59, you're going to get 20. So I know that 1% of the increase in her gross income is €20. But I need to work out what is 100%. I want to know how much is her gross income actually increased by. So if I multiply both sides by 100, clearly the right hand side will become 100%, and 20 multiplied by 100 gives me 2,000. So the increase in her gross income must have been 2,000. Her income increased by 2,000, but 41% of it was given in tax. She actually received 59% of it, which was €1,180. Now let's just look at what the question asked. The question asked us to find her gross income for this year. Her gross income the previous year was 45,000, And we're just after working out that her gross income has increased by 2,000. So if it was 45,000 last year, all I need to do is add 2,000 to it. So obviously this we didn't actually need, I was only using it as an example. But her gross income the first year in part 1 of the question was 45,000, and I now know that her gross income must have increased by 2,000. So 45,000 plus 2,000 gives me 47,000. Sally's gross income in the second year must have been 47,000. So that's quite a tricky question. What I want you to do is go back, watch me explain it again. I really want you to understand this one. I think that's the hardest thing you could get in income tax. Okay, I'm just going to do one question on USC as well. So the previous 2 questions have been on income tax, but now we need to explore the universal social charge, which is called USC. When people earn money, they not only do they have to pay income tax, but there's a number of different taxes or charges that you have to pay before you actually get your net income. So I want to just do one question on USC here. It's relatively straightforward. It's different from income tax in that there's 3 different bands. Notice that when we were doing income tax in the previous 2 questions, you had to pay 2 different rates. Roughly 20% on a certain amount, and then roughly 40% on the remainder. Whereas in USC, there's 3 different bands. On the first €10,036 that Michael is going to earn, he has to pay 2% USC. He has to pay 2% of all of the first €10,036 that he earns. And then on anything that he earns between 10,036 and 16,016, he has to pay 4%. While on everything above 16,016, he's going to pay 7%. So we're going to do this one very similar to the income tax. It's just that there's 3 different bands rather than 2. In this case, we're told that Michael earns €46,000 per annum and he pays 3 different bands of USC. We're asked to calculate the amount of USC he needs to pay. In order to do that, I would structure it quite similar to the income tax. I know that Michael is earning his gross income is €46,000. And we need to split this up into 3 different bands. Notice when we were dealing with income tax, we split it into 2 different bands, but now we're going to split it into 3. I know that on the first €10,036 that Michael earns, he's going to pay 2% tax. So I'm going to get 2% of 10,036. On any money that he earns between 10,036 and 16,016, he's going to pay 4%. He's clearly earning way more than 16,016, so he has to pay 4% of everything between these 2. So to work that out mathematically, what you will do is 16,016 minus 10,036. That tells me that this band is €5,980. Anything between this and this, the difference between the 2 is €5,980. So Michael needs to pay 4% on that €5,980 that he earns. Now, so I've accommodated for the first €10,036 that he earns, and then the next €5,980 that he earns. Overall, I have accommodated for €16,016 of his income. So that's the amount of USC he needs to pay on the first €16,016 that he's earned. I need to work out how much is remaining. So in this case, what I'll do is his total gross income was 46,000. We've already accommodated for the first 16,016 of his income. And that tells me that what's remaining to be paid for him to pay USC on is €29,984. There's a remaining €29,984 for which he needs to pay the higher rate of USC, which is 7%. So he's going to pay 7% on that. So all I need to do here is I need to get 2% of this figure, 4% of this figure, 7% of that figure, and then just add them all together, and that will give me his the total amount of USC that he needs to pay. Once again, just like in the income tax, these figures here have to add up to the gross income. 29,984 plus 5,980 plus 10,036 all add up to 46,000. So when you plug each of these into your calculator, 2% of 10,036 is €200 and 72 cents. 4% of this figure is 239.20, while 7% of this figure is 2,098.88. What we need to do to get the total USC then is to add them all up. If we add up these figures, the total USC that he needs to pay in this case is €2,538 and 80 cents. Okay, the last new thing we're going to look at in this class is compound interest. If you go to page 30 in your maths tables, there's a formula for compound interest. This is how we calculate, like if I invested €1,000 in a bank account and leave it there for 10 years and I earn 2% compound interest every year, how much will I have in the account after 10 years, or that kind of thing. Okay, so it's like investing money in an account and working out how much interest you'll earn. It's the final value. The final value of your investment is equal to P, which we call the principal, or you could just think of it as the amount, the initial investment. The principal just refers to the initial investment. It's the initial investment multiplied by 1 plus I to the power of T, where I is the interest rate as a decimal. So for example, if the interest rate was 5%, to convert that to a decimal, you would divide by 100 and your I would be 0.05. 5 divided by 100 is 0.05. So you put in I as 0.05, which represents an interest rate of 5%. And T is the number of times that interest is applied. So for example, if I invested in an account that gave me interest every year and I left my money in the account for 10 years, that means the number of times interest would be applied would be 10, once every year for 10 years. The reason I'm writing it like that is because what if interest is applied every month? If interest was applied every month and you left your money in the account for a year, that means T would be 12 because you'd earn interest 12 times. So with that in mind, I think it's worth your while. I want you to try the questions in the notes first and then watch my solutions on it and see if you can figure them out. Okay, so let's have a look at the first question here. We're told that Ellen invests €5,000 in the credit union for 3 years. The rate of interest is 1.5% compounded annually. That means that compound interest is applied once every year. It means you can use your compound interest formula and interest comes once a year. Find the value of the investment after 3 years correct to the nearest cent. Once you see compound interest, you should realize that we're talking about this formula. You go to page 30 in your maths tables and it tells you that the final value is equal to the principal times 1 plus I to the power of T. The principal is the value of the initial investment, which in this case P is 5,000. I is the interest rate as a decimal. So if you get 1.5 and divide it by 100, you get 0.015. And I'm going to leave it in the account for 3 years, earning interest once a year, which means the number of times I earn interest is 3. Now I know Pi and T, which means if I just sub into this formula, I'll immediately be able to work out F, the final value of the investment. So in this case, all we have to do is sub in. P is 5,000 times 1 plus I will be 1 plus 0.015 to the power of T, which in this case is 3. Now if we plug all of that into our calculator, our final value here works out as €5,228 and 39 cents. If you invested €5,000 in an account for 3 years, earning 1.5% interest, after 3 years, you would have this much money in your account. Question 2 was quite straightforward. Question 2 says that €16,000 was invested, earning 4% interest compounded annually for 4 years. Calculate the total interest earned. So I haven't quite finished it off, but I've started this question. First of all, it's compound interest, which tells me that I can use the formula on page 30 in my maths tables. The first thing you should always do is write out your formula and write out the information you've been given. I know that the principal, the amount invested, was 16,000. And I know the interest rate is 4%. 4 divided by 100 gives me 0.04. While I know T, the number of times that interest is applied, well, interest is applied every year for 4 years, so T is equal to 4. I can just sub that information into the right-hand side of the compound interest formula. And I end up with the final value is €18,717 and 74 cents. However, the question asked me to calculate the interest that was earned. It didn't ask me to work out the final value, it's how much interest was earned. Well, if we started off with 16,000 and we now have this much money, to work out the interest that was earned, you just subtract the initial investment. Just subtract 16,000 from this figure. The amount of money, the amount of interest that must have been earned is €2,717.74. And that's your final answer for question 2 here. Okay, let's have a look at question 3 here. This one was slightly different. It asks you to find the amount to the nearest cent that needs to be invested at 7% compound interest in order to accumulate €3,500 in 4 years' time. So once again, we're talking about compound interest, so you should write out your formula from page 30. And as always, fill in the information that you know. I know that at the end of 4 years, the final value needs to be €3,500. And I know that the time stamp on this, there's going to be 4 different times where interest is applied. And the interest is 7%, which if I divide by 100 gives me 0.07. So that tells me that I now know the only thing I don't know is P. So if I sub into this formula, I'll be able to work out a value for P, the amount that needs to be invested in the first place. I want to have €3,500 at the end, that's my final value, which must be equal to P times 1 plus 0.07 to the power of 4. Now we just have we've got one equation and one unknown, which means we can find the value of P. In order to find the value of P here, what we need to do is divide both sides by the coefficient of P. We're going to divide both sides by this bracket to the power of 4. If you divide the right hand side by that, you'll just be left with P. If you divide the left hand side by that, it's 3,500 divided by 1 plus 0.07 to the power of 4. And now I'm happy out, so I can just plug all this straight into my calculator. If you plug this value into your calculator, your final value in this case works out as €2,670.13. If you invested that much money in an account and left it there for 4 years, earning 7% compound interest, after 4 years you would have €3,500. So that's your final answer for question 3 here. Okay, so that's all that I want to explore this week. But what I want you to do for next week is I want you to do these 3 questions. 2019 paper 1 question 4, 2018 paper 1 question 10, and 2017 paper 1 question 2. I want you to go through those in detail, and then next week I'm going to start the class by going through the solutions for those 3 questions, and we're going to move on and we're going to talk about currency exchange and dealing with ratios in next week's class.